Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Daredevil Season 2, Episodes 1 through 5. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Daredevil, and as this was a Netflix series that was released all at once, I will be reviewing Season 2 in batches. First doing the first 5 episodes, then doing episodes 6 through 9, then episodes 10 through 13, and then finishing off with an overall review of Season 2. And I will try to release each video once a week. So I have to give a spoiler warning for up to Season 2, Episode 5 of Daredevil. If you have not seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, as I write this review, I have not seen past Episode 5, so this video will not contain any spoilers from beyond Episode 5. So if you have only seen up to Episode 5, then this video will be safe for you. So I was pretty impressed with Season 1 of Daredevil, and so far I'm quite impressed with Season 2 as well. The main thing about the first 4 episodes is that they're all about the Punisher and introducing the character. So let me first start by addressing him and by saying that the Punisher was one of my favorite comics as a kid growing up. In fact, while growing up, the Punisher was seen as the coolest thing you could possibly be into, and I personally loved his comics despite being a bit too young to understand them. In fact, I remember having the Daredevil versus the Punisher comics, as well as the Punisher versus Wolverine, or the Punisher versus Spider-Man, etc., etc. I would say that next to the X-Men and X-Men related comics, the Punisher was my favorite comic book series, more so than Daredevil, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, anything. For me, it was all about the X-Men and the Punisher. And the X-Men has several fairly good movies made about them already. The Punisher, not so much. There's been 3 movies made of the Punisher. One was a low-budget B-grade action movie with Dolph Lundgren from the 90s, which is basically what you'd expect from a low-budget action movie with Dolph Lundgren. The next was a god-awful attempt to make the Punisher go mainstream with a big-budget catastrophe with John Travolta that tried way too hard to be a comic book movie and ended up coming out ridiculously silly. And several years later, they tried again with another low-budget action movie, which was so forgettable I can't even remember if I saw the whole thing or not. So basically, they failed miserably every time they tried to bring the Punisher to the screen. So when I heard Daredevil was going to introduce the Punisher, after seeing how well they translated Daredevil to the screen, I was really excited, and I was not at all disappointed. In fact, they exceeded my expectations. This portrayal of the Punisher was far and away the best portrayal of the Punisher ever on screen by a million miles. They had an actor, the actor who played Shane on The Walking Dead, play the Punisher, and he was absolutely perfect for the role. And finally, they gave a portrayal that was true to what made him so great in the comics. So yeah, I was completely blown away by these first 5 episodes. So far, I am liking Season 2 even more than I liked Season 1. But we'll see where they take it from here. So now let me review the first 5 episodes, going episode by episode, starting with episode 1, Bang. So this was a great introduction to the season, as at first it plants you right back in the situation that left off in season 1 with the friendship between Matt and Foggy and how it has a new shape since Foggy now knows that Matt is Daredevil. And it's a great introduction to the Punisher, as we don't fully see him, yet we see the Irish mob getting gunned down in a bloody massacre. Now at first glance it would appear to be more infighting between gangs, but through their own investigation it pans out to be just one man. It's interesting that they explore the power vacuum that was created after William Fisk was taken down and how many gangs are stepping in to fill that role. However, the Irish's ambitions were taken down really quick by the Punisher. So the plot really kicks in when a man who survived the massacre seeks out Matt and Foggy for legal representation as he seeks to get into witness protection program. However, he was shot in the ordeal, and so Karen has to take him to the hospital under an assumed name. However, that's not good enough, as the Punisher still manages to track him down and tears up the hospital trying to get to him. But in an awesome scene, Karen manages to spirit him away, and while the Punisher nearly gets gets to him with a sniper rifle, Daredevil shows up to stop him in a great fight scene. So my rating out of 10 for Bang is a 9 excellent. So yeah, this was an absolutely great start to the season, as it got me right back into the show and right away set up a new scenario with a new character that was pulled off so well. There's not much more you could ask for from a first episode. So next we'll get to episode 2, Dogs to a Gunfight, which starts off with Foggy finding Matt incapacitated on a rooftop where the Punisher shot him in the head, but thankfully the bullet just grazed him. But it did some serious damage, mainly to his hearing, which for Matt is a very important sense, probably his most important. So Foggy gives him a lecture on how he shouldn't be Daredevil anymore, but of course he doesn't listen to him. But he agrees to get some rest and recuperate for a little bit. Meanwhile, Foggy and Karen deal with Grotto as they meet with the DA, Reyes, who tries to strong-arm them, but Foggy stands up to her in an epic scene that I absolutely loved. It was great how they showed how Foggy was genuinely scared of her, but he managed to stand up to her anyhow. It was pretty awesome. But the DA aren't totally going to back down, as they ask that Grotto wears a wire and inform on a former associated who's crazy. So Grotto doesn't want to do it, but the DA reveals who the gunman is, and that it's a single man with apparent military training whom they refer to as dun dun dun, the Punisher. After that, Foggy is convinced. He convinces Grotto to agree to the deal. Now, some people were complaining about how they shoehorned the introducing the name of the Punisher was, but I didn't think so. I thought they did it just fine. So another interesting thing about the episode is it brings up moral implications of Daredevil and how, is he really different from the Punisher? And that allowing Daredevil to exist and cheering for him may actually bring on someone like the Punisher, who's also vigilante, but a very violent one who's bound to cause some collateral damage. And then we get this great scene where the Punisher buys a high-tech surveillance system from a low-life scumbag, and all seems to be going well until the scumbag offers to sell him some kiddie porn, which of course was a really stupid thing to do. I suppose it's not his fault he didn't know that this guy has a moral code, and to cross it means your death. So Grotto goes to do the meet to be an informant, and he doesn't really want to, but Foggy and Karen talk him into it. But it turns out there's no meet. It's all just a trap to try to get the Punisher, because I suppose they realize he's listening in on police frequencies. However, the Punisher realizes it's a trap, probably because of that high-tech surveillance thingy that he just got, and he sets up a decoy and tries to circumvent the trap to get to Grotto, which he almost does, but Daredevil gets to him first, and while Grotto makes a run for it. So we get another awesome fight scene with the Punisher and Daredevil on the rooftop, but this time while the police are shooting at them. However, it ends when they crash through a building, and Matt starts having hearing problems again, which gives the Punisher the advantage, and by the time the police get there, they're both gone, leading to a really great cliffhanger. So my rating for Dogs to a Gunfight out of 10 is a 9 excellent. Another awesome episode that capitalizes on the Punisher, and it was great seeing Foggy doing his lawyering thing. I love how the show is great at servicing every character instead of having people just be plot devices. So next we get into episode 3, New York's Finest, which was an amazing episode. It begins with Daredevil being chained to a rooftop by the Punisher, where he remains for most of the episode, and this actually played out really well. There wasn't much action involved, but we got to meet the Punisher and learn more about him, and more than that, Daredevil and him got to have it out over the different philosophies, and it was absolutely amazing. Some of the best drama I've ever seen on a TV show in a while. Meanwhile, Karen has to deal with the fallout from Grotto, who's pissed after what happened, and he decides to flee, which is pretty easy to predict was a bad move. She then goes to the DA's assistance to try to get some info on the Punisher and actually manages to pull it off. Meanwhile, Foggy visits Claire, the night nurse, to look for Matt, and it was quite cool to see her again and how she still cares for Matt but knows it won't work out, which I really bought. And seeing the scene where Foggy played his Jedi mind trick at the hospital where he manages to talk down 2 gang members out of a brawl was awesome. That's one thing I really love about this show, that all of the characters on it come off as really well-rounded and they're all given their due. But the best comes when we go back to the rooftop and find the Punisher has taped a gun to Daredevil's hand with 1 bullet in it, and then brings out Grotto and tells Daredevil that if he doesn't kill him, he'll kill Grotto. And this scene was so super tense, especially when the Punisher gets Grotto to admit he recently killed a defenseless old lady, which really muddled the situation. But when he looks like the Punisher is going to pull the trigger, Daredevil shoots off his chains and attacks the Punisher, but he manages to shoot Grotto before he could get to him. So Grotto dies in the Daredevil's arms and asks why he didn't stop him, and that was such a powerful scene. I love this moral questioning that the show is asking about killing and vigilantism and punishment. It was just pulled off so well. However, the Punisher uses this as a distraction to fire on the Dogs of Hell gang that are right across the street, blowing up their motorcycles, which attracts them. The thought being that Daredevil will have to kill them in order to get out of this situation. So, the Daredevil simply knocks out the Punisher and sets him in an elevator and then proceeds to kick the ever-loving shit out of the whole gang of bikers. Now, one of the things Season 1 was praised for the most was a very cinematic single-shot hallway fight scene, so it's not surprising at all to me that they would do something similar in Season 2, but this time adding in stairs and making it longer, and it was awesome. I think this will become the signature of the show that they have to do at least once a season, and I absolutely loved it as it was an amazing scene. My only complaint though is how come these bikers weren't armed with guns? After all, they're chasing someone who shot at them. If he was really armed, he could have just sat back and, shot them and took them all off one by one. And if the bikers were armed, they could have simply Indiana Jones'd it, as Daredevil does all these fancy twirling and spinning. They could have just stand back and shoot him. But then again, if they did that, we wouldn't get this awesome fight scene, so there you go. So my rating for New York's Finest out of 10 is a 10. The best. This was an amazingly tense episode with some really great suspenseful dialogue, and which is something I really appreciate, and it's topped off with another amazing epic fight scene, and on top of that, getting to meet the Punisher and know more about him. It was simply amazing. So then we get to episode 4, Penny and Dime, which begins with the introduction of a new badass gangster in the Irish Mafia, and he's introduced the way any badass gangster is introduced, by killing another gangster for no good reason other than to show off how badass he is. I'm sorry, but that is a bit cliched. However, we do see he's determined to find the Punisher because apparently he stole a lot of money from them, and to his credit, he seems to do quite a good job of tracking him down. But we see, that the Punisher has their money stashed away in the van. So then we get a scene with Grotto's funeral where Matt, Karen, and Foggy are the only people in attendance. And I'm sorry, this is a cliche that's always bothered me, because I don't think in real life they would actually hold a funeral service when there's only 2 or 3 people in attendance. But I suppose Matt is good friends with the priest, so I might give this one a pass. Anyway, Karen begins to go on a crusade to use the files she got about the Punisher to find out more about him, which eventually leads her to tracking down his house, where she finds out his name is Frank Castle and he used to have a family, a wife, and 2 girls. Meanwhile, the Irish are successful in tracking down the Punisher, and he kills a bunch of them, but they manage to get him in the end. And I'm sorry, but I find it a bit strange that, the badass was just like, oh, thanks for thinning the herd. when really he should be more concerned about their numbers because the Punisher has already killed off a shitload of them. But whatever. They capture him and torture him to find out where the money is, and at first he's completely resistant until they threaten to kill his dog, which I found somewhat questionable, but sure. He tells them where the money is, so the badass sends some goons to pick it up, but as Admiral Akbar is fond of saying, it's a trap, and the money explodes, killing the goons with it. I kind of saw this coming because I knew the Punisher cared nothing about money, but it was still an awesome scene. So the badass then decides it's time to kill the Punisher, who's prepared for this and breaks free, and we find out the whole thing was a setup by the Punisher so he could get revenge on the Irish gang for killing his family. But when it looks like the Punisher is done for, Daredevil shows up and kicks some ass. And it's cool how at the same time he's kicking ass, he's also stopping Frank from killing anyone. So Daredevil takes him to a cemetery where we get this amazing scene where Frank opens up to him about the death of his family and how it affected him. And this was such a touching scene. This was so true to the comics and managed to capture the anguish that he felt so well, which is one of the reasons this was far and away the best adaptation of the Punisher ever. So Daredevil then turns Frank over to the police and wants to give them all the credit so that people will respect the law more than vigilantism. And then we get a scene where Matt and Karen kiss. I knew this was coming because they were building up to it, but I was trying to ignore it because it's stupid. You know, it's not that these two don't have any chemistry. I guess they do, but I don't know. It's just so cliche. I'm totally not down with it. So my rating for Penny and Dime is a 9. Excellent. A pretty tense and exciting episode with a very touching ending where Daredevil and the Punisher bond, and we get some this very touching scene to see how human Frank is. But at the same time, we get a few gangster cliches and a cliche romance. But overall, a powerful episode. So finally, we come to episode 5, Kinbaku, where we switch gears from the Punisher to Elektra, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not as invested in Elektra. I don't remember her from the comics at all. And I only know her from the horrible Ben Affleck movie and the even more horrible Jennifer Gardner spinoff. But I can tell from this episode that she's portrayed much better here as well, as I do think her character is interesting and works well, but overall I'm just not as interested. So we get some flashbacks to when Elektra and Matt first met, when he breaks into a rich party and manages to impress her with his ability to read people. But they go off and cause some mischief, and it's obvious she has very loose morals and is all about having fun. Whereas in present time, she tries to get him to help her with her business situation with these corporate types trying to screw her out of her father's inheritance, but Matt refuses to help. Meanwhile, Matt and Foggy's practice is in ruins because Reyes is trying to destroy them and doing a pretty good job at it. And so when Foggy finds they have a whole bunch of money in their account, he's over the moon, but Matt knows it's from Elektra, so he tries to give it back, but she kind of cons him into showing up anyway. So we also explore this stupid relationship with Matt and Karen more, which is not entirely horrible, I guess, but it ties into Elektra trying to manipulate him more. So Karen also goes off on a solo investigation to find out more about the Punisher, as she's convinced Reyes has something to do with him and is hiding something. So she goes to the newspaper that featured in season 1 to seek out their help, and there she finds through research that Frank Castle's family was killed in a gang war between the Irish gangs, the Mexican cartel, and the Dogs of Hell biker gang, the 3 gangs that the Punisher was going after, so this makes perfect sense. Meanwhile, in flashbacks, we learn that Elektra has some fighting skills and knows all about Matt's fighting skills as well. And we also learn why Elektra and Matt had a falling out, because she tricked him into breaking into the house of a man who killed Matt's father and then ties him up and tries to get Matt to kill him, which he is totally not okay with, and he's quite pissed at her her for trying to get him to commit murder. So in present time, he goes to her place to confront her and tells her to stay away from him, but apparently the whole thing was a setup to get him to fight for her as she's about to be ambushed by a bunch of Japanese gangsters, and then she breaks out the old Daredevil costume, meaning she somehow knows who he is and she planned this all along. And I must admit, this was a pretty good cliffhanger. So my rating for Kinbaku is a 7, very good. Not as interesting as the Punisher stuff, but Elektra was still pulled off pretty well. It was a pretty interesting character, and there were some great tense scenes in this episode, intermixed with some cheesy romance scenes and flashbacks that dragged on just a tad bit too long. So that's it for my review of Daredevil Season 2 Episodes 1 through 5. Be sure to check back here every week as I review the remaining episodes of Daredevil. And check out my channel for many other videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, The Walking Dead, Better Call Saul, and more. And make sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.